Good afternoon. Welcome to the Digital Transformation for Healthcare Insurance webinar from Wovenworth. My name is Carlos Melendez. I am Chief Operating Officer and co-founder at Wovenworth. And with me today and being the speaker for this webinar is Dana Montenegro. Dana is our Chief Design Officer, which means he both oversees our user experience and interface practice while also bringing design thinking to our clients' engagements. He has over 15 years in working in innovation and design and used to work at Red Bull Energy Drink overseeing innovation, and then created a design and innovation strategy consultancy called Seriously Creative, where I met him some 10 years ago. Since then, he has worked at Fjord, which is one of the world's top design and innovation firms, and is part of Accenture Interactive. When Dana was returning from Accenture working in DC to Puerto Rico, we would run into each other and we would talk about how design was influencing digital transformation projects within the federal government, including on CMS projects where he had worked on. For us at Wovenworth, we always invest the time to understand projects deeply, but we see how more complex the problems are getting and that we need to help more of our clients shape the problems before the solution. And this is why Dana joined Wovenworth, to help us understand what is the right solution to build so that we can then build it right. At Wovenworth, we are a software engineering, artificial intelligence, service design, digital consultancy. We have been in business for more than 17 years. Our team is now over 140 people, and we are serving customers around the world, from Puerto Rico to our latest customer in Tokyo, Japan. And with that, I leave Dana.
So good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are. Like Carlos said, I'm Dana Montenegro. I'm the Chief Design Officer here at Wovenworth. I've worked on clients, everything from Adidas to health insurance, to consumer products, to government clients. So let's jump right into this. I think the reason a lot of people are probably on this call is because we all know how hard digital transformation is and how hard even just a digital project is. So there's this number, the study from Forbes and McKinsey showed that a total of 900 billion was wasted in 2018 solely on digital transformation projects, and a whopping 70% of digital transformation projects failed, right? Within all of those digital projects, there's just a simple digital project that fails kind of like every day. And despite all of our kind of best efforts, despite all the planning and analysis and requirements that goes into these projects that we have, too many of them either they don't even launch, or they launch and they turn out really not to work, or they kind of underwhelm. They miss the opportunity to truly be transformative. So let me start at digital transformation. And why we kind of talk about that a lot. The way we define it is digital transformation. It's a process of using digital technologies to create new or modified existing business processes, cultures, and customer experiences to meet changing business and market requirements. Basically, it means it's not just about upgrading your technology. It is about changing business models. It's using the technology that we have at our fingertips today and that are coming down the pipeline to do radically new things, which every organization is being driven to do. But it's hard. Innovation is hard. Anything digital is hard. Technology is hard, but it's particularly hard because of three things. One, it's disruptive. You have to rethink what you do, how you do it. It's about innovation. So it's not just something you can plan out. It's not something you can take little steps. There's big jumps to be made. The other part is it's all about new and emerging technologies that are sometimes hard to understand or hard to see in the context of our business. So we're developing and designing things and experiences and services that don't yet exist using technologies that aren't quite there. And the last one is it requires organizations to change themselves. Really, we say digital transformation, but it should be called probably people transformation, because it requires us to learn new ways of working, new ways of organizing, new ways of planning in ways that are much more agile, much more chaotic sometimes, and that force us to really have to align an organization. There's a book called Dual Transformation by this guy, Harvard professor Scott Anthony, and he says we're really trying to do three things at one time. He says, first, we're trying to do transformation A, and that's just strengthen today. And in the world of technology, that means how do we take the tools and the services and the products we have right now and make them better than they ever were before. But then you're also trying to do transformation B, which is all that digital transformation stuff, which is create tomorrow, do things that no one's quite thinking of yet or not thinking of the way it's being done yet. And the part in between, which he called this flip the dilemma, is linking capabilities. It means we have to learn new ways of working in order to get from A to B. All of that falls in the purview of someone in your organization who's trying to kind of like juggle all these balls. So every delivering digital transformation really starts we talk about it, it starts top down, right? There needs to be buy-in from the organization, and there needs to be some big thinking and all. But its success really depends on bottom up, right? It depends on digital projects. Even the smallest project, the better we do it, if we can do these projects in better, more dynamic ways, it gives us a training ground to be better at delivering digital transformation as well. And that's why we kind of focus on how do you get the project right, this kind of base unit. The thing that kind of stands in the way for everyone of any digital success is three things complicated in today's world. And I always talk about it as this perfect storm that kind of comes together, right? It's VUCA, it's the big shift, and liquid expectations. VUCA is a word probably a lot of you have heard. If you haven't, it comes out of a Harvard business professor trying to explain what working in business is like today as compared to maybe even just like 15 years ago. And VUCA is an acronym for volatile, right? Complex, right? Abstract and uncertain. And it says that you just can't work the same old way because the world has changed too much. There's no longer kind of just an easy path where we have all the information, where we can make a very rationalized, slowly thought out decision and then just implement it. Things are changing. It's like tectonic plates moving very fast. And what it results in is it means no one person in your organization understands all the complexity. It takes more collaborative effort today than it took maybe 20 years ago. You'll never have all the information you want in order to make a perfect decision. You'll always have to kind of make a decision with only 70% of the information and kind of have to take this bet. Getting people to agree to do something means getting everyone to understand something that's hard to understand. So alignment is very hard because we're dealing with this stuff that feels like you can't quite wrap your hands around it. And there's no level of analysis that'll make it 100% clear. You'll have to wrestle with issues where the data is more nuanced than prescriptive. The second thing is the whole world is shifting, right? And that's health insurance to any other industry. Everyone's going from physical to digital. It's instead of just pipelines of projects, we're talking about how are we building out complete platforms. It's from shareholders to stakeholders, which sometimes feel like adversaries. It's going from incremental change to where you have to really speed it up and get very exponential into the change before you get left behind. And it's gone from thinking about things as products and like an IT traditionally to thinking of everything that we're creating as a service and an experience for some user, whether within your organization or outside your organization. And the last one, liquid expectations, comes from the founder of Fjord, where I used to work. And he says that what people expect today is changing very quickly. And it means who you compete against is changing, at least from an exponential point of view. Let's take if you're a bank. If you're a bank, all of your digital services are going to be compared against all other banks, right? BBVA, Deutsche Bank, Citibank. Everyone's going to kind of look at, like, say, your app, for example. and say, which one is easier to use? Which one provides me more value? That's normal, right? But we also have experiential competitors because there's other people in your space who do things similar to you or do a small something that you do. So if you're the bank, people want to know, why isn't it easier to pay an individual like PayPal or Venmo does? Or why isn't my banking app as intuitive and easy to manage my money as Mint is? So they want you to be as good as them as well. But in today's world, we also compete against what are called perceptual competitors. If people have experienced Amazon, Airbnb, and DoorDash, the seamlessness of it, the predictability of it, the ability to provide you things when you need them, they want to know why apps for government are not as good as Amazon. They expect that now. In digital healthcare, people want the things, the tools, the digital tools that they have to work with to work as seamlessly as Amazon, to be as easy to understand as Airbnb, to be as predictive as DoorDash. So we're also having to raise our game from an experience point of view. Add the layer of how complex healthcare and healthcare insurance is, from you have multiple different customers, the cost of innovation is outpacing people's ability to pay for it. Value care and regulations are pushing people towards patient experience, right? And how 5 stars are used. New technology and new challenges, the Internet of Medical Things, ambient technologies that are rising up, new platforms for patient management, right? Natural language input, telemedicine has become the thing that rose out of the pandemic. And there's other ways that healthcare delivery has changed because of this pandemic shakeup. There's new tech native players in the area. Apple, Google, and Amazon are all pushing very hard to be in the healthcare space. And finally, there's this data overload and the promise of data to provide very individual healthcare, but there's so much data and it's so hard to figure out what to do with it. So if those are the challenges, we kind of, bold plans don't come from old planning processes. We need a new way to deliver these digital projects, these digital tools and services. All right, we can't solve the problems of the 21st century using tools from the 19th century, but that's what we're kind of stuck with. And I'm not just talking about the difference between Agile and Waterfall. We tend to be very requirements driven, right? Get requirements, design, code and unit tests, system integration, operation and maintenance, right? In a very sped up world, it's very tempting to get into what we know, right? We talk about something that's needed, we figure out what it is, we do all the planning analysis, we talk to internal stakeholders, and then we build and we launch things. Well, that doesn't work out when we're having to do new things at the pace of new expectations. So everyone has this innovation wish list. If we have to deliver fast in this VUCA, this digital transformation world, wouldn't it be great if, one, we had better choices, right? Give us better choices that create value for us and our customers, both now and for their future needs, right? No one wants to have limited choices in front of them. The second one is, wouldn't it be great if we could make better decisions? We reduce the risk and cost of innovation efforts. They deliver outcomes faster to market, reduce investment, avoid those rabbit holes and all that rework that tend to delay projects and start to bloat budgets. And wouldn't it be great if we had better launches, we had better kind of implementation, right? If we can increase the likelihood that new ideas actually get implemented, align everyone around the efforts, reduce resistance, less organizational collateral damage. And the super wish list, the one that feels a little bit like a fantasy, is what if all of these digital efforts of ours also led to a better organization? Could it actually make us individually and organizationally more adaptable and capable of dealing with this VUCA world, right? We need a process that also leads us to those things, right? And that process exists, and more companies and digital forward thinking companies, Amazon, Google, Airbnb, right? steel case. There's even governments, the government of the UK are starting to think more in terms of design. If they realize that this is what we face. We face this kind of chaos where you can't solve a problem if at first you don't work to understand it deeply. We tend to try to start solving our digital problems here, right? We're at the technical complexity. The how are we going to build this, right? And there is a lot of complexity there, and you need a lot of very creative and smart people to figure that out until you get down to delivering something, the what, right? But really, today, we kind of need to back it up. We need to go back to what the human problem, the why. We need to understand the problem earlier and kind of at a deeper level, right? A good way to think about this is we think like as business thinking tells us to rapidly jump into a problem and look at the empirical evidence that we have in front of us, like solid data. And very quickly, let's come to a decision and a solution and let's start executing on that. We're constantly in this race to have to get into build mode. What design thinking tells us, which you've probably heard of design thinking, you probably heard it in Forbes, you probably heard it in Harvard Business Review. If you haven't, it's just a way of thinking and approaching problems, particularly when you need to innovate and do new things, that takes from how designers have always worked to deal with these kind of complex and abstract problems. And what it says is, you got to take that step back and you have to understand a problem pretty deeply. And you need to look at things beyond just the empirical evidence. You have to have a broader view of what the problem or the challenge is. And from there, you move forward better informed in order to produce maybe more, there's more than one solution to be delivered. We think of this as like these two sides of this, as like this two sides of a diamond. One is learning and understanding, this opening part, and then the other one is decision making and taking action, right? We put that together at Wovenworth, and I think a lot of digital native companies, this is their default way of thinking. Is we think of it as a discover, design, and deliver approach, where we understand that a lot of effort gets put in what we see as that phase two. Build the thing right, build it at scale, build it with the right technologies, build it so it doesn't break. But we say, you have to go farther back into the design in phase one, where you make sure you're building the right thing. And that's really this kind of first discovering what's the right problem to solve. Are we really solving the right problem? I know we need some kind of technology in order to reduce the paperwork of providers, but what are the problems that really need to be addressed? And the second diamond of that design one is, okay, now that we have a good grasp of the problem, let's look at what are the different ways and the opportunities and the possibilities of how to solve it. And then let's make sure that that's in line with what people want, how people will use it. And let's get rid of the mistakes early, and then we get into delivery, right? So this is us kind of saying, take this big step back, invest a little bit of time in shaping your understanding of the problem and of what the solution is, and then throw yourself into what the magic of technology can really deliver. That might seem like you're like really just delaying effort, but for us, it's go slow to end fast. And it's kind of your insurance policy in making sure you don't make massive, costly mistakes. Now, when you see it here kind of in this model, it feels like, wow, there's a whole lot of effort going into that discover and design. When do we actually start to deliver? Because I have deadlines. In reality, that discover and design are a very small part of an overall effort. If you have a project that might take 9 or 10 months to deliver out, that discover and design phase probably is something like 4 or 6 weeks maybe, in order to make sure you're shooting in the right direction. So if that's our approach, we have 5 things that really kind of help us get it right. And I'm not saying that these are the end 5 things that make every project work right and lead to digital transformation, but they are the 5 that people tend to kind of miss, right? And they are these upfront things. Let me go through them one at a time. First one is we call start human and think experiences, right? The problem isn't that the technology didn't work, it's that it doesn't work for the people it was designed for, is what we say. Jeff Bezos says, I would define Amazon by our biggest idea, which are customer centricity, putting the customer at the center of everything we do. In the world of health insurance, that can be providers, right? It can be EPAs, it can be patients, it can be advocacy groups, right? It can be employers, but starting by thinking through things from the people who will either be impacted by your digital service or going to have influence over is kind of the right starting point. And in every business, we're trying to balance these three things. We're not saying that you only think about people, but we really have to include them, because usually in business, we think about viability first, right? Does it support our goals, our strategy, right? Can we make it, is this a profitable way to go? And we also think about feasibility of technology. Can it be done in a scalable, maintainable way? Is the technology there? Do we have the technology resources? Kind of the last conversation that doesn't get enough attention is the desirability and the usability. It's the user. Is this what people need and value? Is it usable? Is it understandable? Will it amplify my users, my employee users' capability to do what they do, right? Innovation and digital transformation happens when we balance these three things, but we start with the user, right? When we're selling to users, we always say it's better to make things people actually want rather than try to make people want things through marketing. In a lot of what healthcare is, we're not selling something to someone, but the way to think about it is make it work for people who use it rather than make people work to use the thing, right? People adopt things that consider them, all right? The way we go about doing this is we say we take an outside in, and we think every business has to take an outside in approach. Outside in means we do way too much of our thinking inside the confines and walls and thinking of our organization. We sit down in a boardroom, we analyze things, we look at numbers that come directly out of our organization, and we make determinations. But we have to be outside in. Outside in means going out to the people who we're going to serve. That can be employees, that can be people in a call center, and it can be patients, right? But outside in means we have to go out and understand them in the reality. And that's not surveys or focus groups. That's human-centric design research, which is open-ended. It lets people tell you what's really important to them. It's not statistically relevant groups of 100. Sometimes this research is done and you talk to 7 very interesting people, and that alone gives you the deep insights you need. And it's not statistics, demographics, or observations. We want to talk to real people in roles and need deep insight that explain the why behind their actions. It's really trying to understand people's motivations and their unmet, unarticulated needs. So this is kind of an example of how we do that. We say, you have 3 ways to learn from people. You can ask, right? And people tell you, they'll tell you what they say they do. You can look and observe, which means you want to see what do people really do in that situation, because sometimes those are not the same thing. And the other one is to immerse yourself by trying, right? Experience it for yourself. Go there and try to do what a nurse, for example, has to do, right? Going out and learning in the real world helps you uncover blind spots that you would otherwise build into your digital project that you would have to completely rework later, or that would lead to just work process and efficiencies, right? How do we bring a lot of this knowledge back into an organization? A lot of the smartest organizations bring these people to life. So they create what are called personas. And here's an example of personas and work that we've been doing for an organization that sends nurses and social workers in order to deal with patients who have a high risk of hospital readmission and adverse effects and need to have some care done at home, right? Well, we went out, you go talk to these people and you start to understand what are the digital tools that are going to help them do their job in a more efficient way and help these patients. And sometimes we're not just designing for one type of user, there's 2 different kind of users, with two different kind of needs. But by humanizing these people and talking about the needs they have, it helps us make better technology decisions and feature decisions, right? I love to show this one. This is just an example from another company, how they bring these personas alive within their organization in artwork to keep everyone very clear about, like, who do we work for? Who do we have to consider when we make decisions, right? The other part of this is experiences. Steve Jobs always said, you got to start with the customer experience and work backward to the technology, not the other way around. There's a big difference between thinking of things as requirements versus experience. Requirements, we can write down, sitting in our office, right? A terabyte is a requirement, building the perfect technical thing, plans around technology and business needs. These are deliverables. And experience talks to outcomes, right? That a user can save the things they want. And it forces us to ask questions about, how will someone experience that? What is success for that person, right? A good way to think about experiences is to think about a restaurant, going to a restaurant, right? There's actions that you experience as a patron to a restaurant, right? Customer orders a seasonal dish, right? And you sit there in the dining room and food is brought to you. Well, there's a lot of front stage stuff that you see happen. Waiters take orders, they provide service, right? They greet you. But there's a lot of stuff that happens behind the scenes that you never see, but that are important. Backstage things, kitchen staff making food, and there's supporting processes. If that's going to be a seasonal dish, someone needs to have had a process to purchase fresh daily, but there's prep time, there's ordering systems, right? Well, it works for any organization that way. There are users who have actions, diabetic patients who need to take more control over their own health. There's front stage things, which are nurses who and health communicators, but there's a lot of backstage stuff where our technology is either amplifying a patient's ability to do something or making it harder for someone to do it, right? A lot of this work is done by going out and understanding people's real workflows and what they really do, understanding who are the actors, who are all the people who influence, support, or get in the way of actions. We also look at, like, what are the policies, the unseen actions that influence whether a product will work or not. And we try to extract what are the pain points and the areas of opportunity, what frustrates people, what's inefficient, what are workarounds, what are unmet needs, what leads to things not happening the way we wish they happen. And then below that, there's this technology and data line. What supports this workflow? What's missing? What could be added? But this is done through Post-it notes and organizations in order to kind of see the holistic experience of things, in order to understand how technology will work in that workflow. These turn into journey maps. This is, by the way, this is intentionally blurred out. It's non-healthcare example of part of a journey map that we recently did. But you see, there's different points within this that bring together a lot of knowledge that help people make better decisions, from stages and actions, the moments that matter, right? Key concepts, organizational objectives, right? Supporting technology and AI. Sometimes these look like, this is from Veterans Administration. This is a public project that was done that shows the journey map as well as like service blueprints, and it helps people see the big picture of things. I want to very quickly take a little detour to explain, how experience can really matter, right? And I know this isn't health insurance, but it is healthcare. Doug Dietz was a product designer at GE, and he created probably the most innovative MRI and CT scan machine of its time. And I think this is well over 10 years ago. And he talks about his experience in creating this wonder of technology and deploying it, right? An incredible machine. But he says he wanted to go see it in action. He goes down to the San Diego Children's Hospital, and he is mortified to find that children are afraid of this machine, and he encounters children screaming and crying, and frustrated hospital employees and exacerbated parents who just look like they're on the verge of crying themselves. And he learns from the hospital that the hospital's actually like losing a lot of money because they're having to reschedule children. They're losing technical staff who don't want to work in a children's hospital anymore because this is stressful for them, right? And there's a cost of sedation and all. So he realizes he can't change a machine, but maybe they can change the experience. And they just learned about design thinking. He takes his team and they start talking to parents and children, and they start talking to the staff at the hospital. And what they come out with is a holistic experience where children receive like an invite to the hospital when they're going to get an MRI. And there's like little footprints that guide them to find, you know, the room, and the staff are dressed up as pirates, and the machine looks like a big pirate ship, and they tell children, oh, you got to lay really still, and when you hear the big noise, that's us loading the cannons. And he talks about how, you know, how amazing it was to then see a kid come out and asking their mother, you know, can we come back tomorrow, right? And that's the power of experience. And I know that's, you know, that's like creating kind of a very ends experience, but those experiences also go into how people use technology that we create, right? Let me give you another example, right? How might prescription delivery be a better experience for everyone? This is a project we worked on with two client partners, a PBM and a health insurance company that wanted to provide at-home delivery of prescriptions. And thankfully, this client's actually the one who saw this as an experience, who understood this from the point of view of how different people and different actors would experience. And they initiated this program of using design thinking in order to figure out how the technology would support this desire, right? So the technology, you think about it, it's just prescription, manage orders, deliver, right? But once you get into it, you realize there's 14 different interfaces, which means multiple people to please. And that creates a complexity. Well, the process was all about interviewing with users and other stakeholders to map out the idea and experiences and identify key features and functionalities that might have otherwise been missed if we had just sat down and thought through, okay, what's the workflow that has to happen in order to get a prescription from a doctor's notepad to a patient's front door. But when you think about it as experience, you start to realize where the opportunities are and where the potential pitfalls would be long before you actually start coding anything out. The second one is about interrogating your data, right? This is where you put data and design together. You know, as designers, we tend to think a lot about how we interact with people and talking to people, and that's where the truth is found. But in reality, data augments that. Data is a problem solver coming at the problem from the opposite direction and meeting design in the middle, right? So data can help us, data leading discovery. It's where you use data in order to find the right problems that you want to design solutions for. Data can ground our insights, like how can we use data to help us understand the context of a problem we found by talking to people. And the last one is data prioritizing design. Once design has found insights and problems and ideas, data can be used within your organization in order to figure out, well, where should we really invest our time? What will make the best return on investment and return on experience, right? We worked on a project on how might AI drive predictions lead to better opportunities to deliver a better service, right? We helped create an AI predictive model in order to figure out which members of an insurance company were most likely to churn, right? To disenroll, right? So there's AI finding a problem. Where design would come in is where once AI has told us this is specifically where the problem lies, design steps in, well, let's understand it from those people's point of view so that we can create solutions that are very specific to that kind of problem, rather than doing what we tend to do in creating digital solutions, which is try to throw every solution we possibly can at it and hope that something works, right? The third one is stretching perspective and setting a purpose, right? If you do what you've always done, you'll always get what you always got. We have a trap in any industry is we tend to think that the solutions are defined by our industry. So we tend to develop health insurance or healthcare solutions and experiences, right? Or we tend to just digitize what was otherwise an analog workflow and process, right? And this kind of cuts us off from the potential of looking at our possible solutions from a different set of eyes. The first way to try to break this kind of being grounded and being stuck in the gravity of your industry is to start with purpose, right? Journey maps help align efforts, but everything needs a way to measure success and set direction. So like John F. Kennedy said, we're going to land on the moon and return a man safely within 10 years. It sets a direction. It doesn't say exactly how we're going to do it. It allows people to think a little bit bigger than a prescriptive way of doing it, right? Output is very prescriptive. Build a system for patients to report and track diabetes lifestyle changes, right? That would just tell you you're going to do it the way everyone else does it. If you give people a purpose that's linked to an outcome that more tells you what experience or value you want to deliver without prescribing how to get there, you give people kind of the freedom to think a little bit outside the box. So an outcome is help members take more control over their diabetes by giving them the tools they need when they need them. That opens up our solution space. One way that comes to life is either problem-focused product roadmaps or experience product roadmaps, where instead of just saying, these are all the things we're going to build over the next 3 years to get here, it's going to say, these are all the experiences, or these are all the problems that we know exist that we're going to conquer. And we're not exactly saying exactly how we're going to do it. We leave it open. The other part where we talk about stretching your point of view is looking beyond the constraints of your industry and the moment to explore possibilities and find inspiration to improve your service or product. One way of doing that is comparative experiences, right? It's looking outside your industry to people who are dealing with maybe similar experiences, but in very different contexts in order to get inspiration. So for example, and I know this is health insurance, but it is healthcare. Think of if you're a hospital administrator, right? And you have to improve patient care by improving the in-hospital stay experiences of patients and like their family members. If you looked at a hotel, a 5-star hotel, dealt with the same thing, they are bringing people in, they're orienting them, there's a stay, there's a checkout, and there's like a leaving and after experience. If you looked at how a hotel did it, obviously you're not going to do everything that a hotel does, but the inspiration for how you might rethink how you approach things starts to spark new thinking about what goes into your digital service. Another one is thinking a little bit beyond just the product. We kind of get caught in this thing of we have to deliver this one kind of product, but all of our products and services kind of interconnect and work within an ecosystem within your organization, with your partners, with healthcare writ large, thinking about how does my service, how will it connect with other things, right? How could it take from other services that we're developing in order to be more robust, more of a platform than just one simple product? And the last one is, and we do this exercise with teams, is called time travel. It's we're building a product for right now to solve problems of right now. But if we were to take a moment to stop and think, well, let's look at what technologies aren't here yet, but they're just coming over the horizon. They will be much more and more relevant in the next 2 to 3 years, right? Natural language processing being one that's really starting to impact in healthcare delivery now, right? If we thought now that we would have to develop our product to be ready for that, near future, we'd potentially make decisions that made us more agile and more adaptable to making those changes as they come down the pipeline. The other one is thinking about it from the point of view of users. What will be more relevant for users? What will be more important for them in the next few years? Think about any of you who've dealt with Medicare patients, right? We used to always say, well, elderly people, they're not, digital natives, right? They struggle, right? We got to be, Facebook, right? But that's changing. And everyone's seen that, and particularly driven by the pandemic, right? More and more people are becoming more comfortable with digital tools and digital experiences, right? So if we start thinking what's going to be more relevant for people in the next 2 or 3 years, we start making probably smarter decisions early as we're developing something. Sometimes those things turn out to be like this. And this is a project I worked on when I was in Fjord that had to do with the kidney transplant experience in the United States. We take a lot of these just over the horizon ideas or emerging ideas, and they start to, you start to map them out in kind of like this forward looking visions of what might be possible now and in kind of the near future. And by making this, visual and putting up with an organization, it keeps people focused on what the decisions we're making now have to take into consider many of these ideas, that are going to be integrated with it. The fourth thing is about prototyping with partners and testing in the wild, right? I always love to say it was a great idea, but because we weren't 100% certain it would work, we ignored it and we let it die so we could be 100% certain that it would not work here. It's hard to take risks, right? Especially if we don't know 100% how things are going to work out, right? The way to deal with uncertainty is to prototype early, right? And to get the failures out of the way. And any of you who work in an agile organization, there's all this this rapid customer testing, right? User testing in order to learn to work out the kinks early, right? What it looks like, or things like this, is prototyping for any digital product should really start as hand drawings, right? These are just wireframes, but there are ways to take much more complex systems and mock them up quickly and put them in front of people within your organization in order to get feedback. And that's where prototyping is really important. By trying things out and making new ideas kind of visible and touchable and experimental, we get feedback from within the organization, which cuts down on a lot of resistance and identifies a lot of kind of blinders we might have that would, if we were just working ourselves and trying to deliver the product, we may not see those things. We'd spend a lot of time and only much later on get input from people well down the road that would force us to kind of reverse track, right? Prototyping allows us to get feedback in time and quickly, right? And there's lots of tools that help us prototype today, and especially in our socially distanced world. Mocking something up really quickly from a low fidelity, a mid fidelity, or a high fidelity prototype is very easy today. I mean, we are talking about minutes to hours sometimes to create a very simple experience, and then use any one of these tools, Sketch, Balsamic, Marvel, Webflow, in order to put it in front of several dozen users, get them to use it, so that you can find out, the way we thought this would work is not the way it's going to work. We need to make some changes really quickly, right? So we also say you got to make these digital things people can interact with and put them out into the wild to go test them with people before they're fully baked, right? We tend to want to only show our best work, but really we got to show our work in progress and get feedback really quickly. And most of you know about A/B testing, right? But that has to be done. It has to be done constantly in order to figure out what's working and what's not, because you want to get the failures out of the way. So we've been working with a partner on a at-home COVID test, and they create the test with a swab that you put in your nose, right? And we've been creating the accompanying app that helps walk people through the process of doing this correctly, but also has you take a photo of it. That we have an AI model trained in order to read the results and be able to give you back your positive, your negative, and the next step of that would be generating a pass that you can show people that proves your COVID negative. Well, we can sit down and logic it out. How will people use this? What is the right instructions? What's the right way to say this? But instead of that, we actually put it in front of real people doing real tests, and in this case, a real test for COVID, right? And this is just the over-the-shoulder observation. Let me see how you do it to see if my assumptions are right or if I'm totally off and I need to make changes, and it's better to make those changes now. Things we hadn't really anticipated is it's not just often always one person using this, it's two people using the app at one time, right? Working together. And we found points where that are very confusing about it, things we had to redo. And we also found out, people want to know, they want to make sure, they want to know their level of confidence in the results, and how do you communicate that in smart ways that allow people to take this test, right? So that's just an example of prototyping. This is from that kidney project where you see all of these ideas get prototyped out. Every little bit of any screen space has been thought out, tested, right? And then captured, right? One of the best reasons that everyone does this is for that what's called the 1, 10, 100 rule, right? Forrester estimated for every dollar that you invest in fixing a problem during design, right, in that discovery area, it would cost $10 to fix that same problem during development, and it costs $100 to fix the same problem after the product is released, right? Basically, what that tells you is the earlier you can find the problems and get rid of the failures, the cheaper it'll be, right? The last one is unleashing the power of radical collaborative teams, right? The secret is to work less as individuals and more as teams. I play not my 11 best, but my best 11, right? All of us are smarter than any of us, right? But usually we give these projects to one part of the organization. Very unjustly, we drop it on the CIO or CTO and say, okay, this is what I want, go build it. We don't give enough input to them or access to information for them, and they have to make a lot of guess, and they build, what was expected. Diverse collaboration gets more people involved and gets more perspective and makes sure we see problems earlier, right? The way of doing this is, thinking about, we have hierarchy in order to manage operations, but to create anything new, we need to create these hybrid teams. Don't just give digital projects to kind of one person or one department. Find, 3 to 4 representatives from across the organization to own the project. And that means the most senior person has to be accountable. That usually means the CEO has to kind of have their finger on the pulse of a project. You have to create the cross-functional teams, not just you can't just make this a CIO problem. You need to break the silos with real representation. And these teams need to be authorized to take action and accountable for the results tied to the experience. And that's not like the school project where one person on that team is accountable and the other people help out. The whole team becomes accountable. And this means faster alignment, identifying and removing barriers quicker, and a much more seamlessness across the organization, right? So let me take you back to that wish list we had of those 4 things: better choices, better decisions, better launch, better organization, right? If you want better choices, well, then you need to identify the right problem and define it well in the beginning. And you need to come up with better ideas. Well, putting the human first and thinking experience and interrogating your data helps you do that. And coming up with better ideas is dependent upon you stretching your perspective, right? If you want better decisions, you need to generate multiple new perspective ideas to choose between, and you need to eliminate the ideas that don't work as early as you can. Well, stretching your perspective generates multiple new perspective ideas, right? And eliminating the ideas that don't work early, you do that by prototyping and testing, right? A better launch is make sure people are aligned and committed as fast as you can. Well, the more you involve more people in setting that goal, that clear, that purpose, and stretching perspective, the more you're going to have that, as well as involving people from across the organization when you unleash collaboration. And a better organization means engaging local intelligence and breaking silos. That happens when we start creating these more collaborative teams. So those are our 5 things that lead to better digital success in healthcare insurance. And from there, thank you very much. I know we potentially have some questions, and I think Carlos has them in front of him.
Yes. Hi, Dania. Thank you. Thank you for all that insight that you just provided. Yes, we have here a couple of questions from our guests in the audience. The first one would be, what are the biggest design thinking initiatives being undertaken among healthcare insurers?
So there's tons of them. It's kind of hard to say what are kind of the biggest ones, but the ones that I think are often the most interesting is when we're talking about like hospital readmissions and adverse outcomes, because we're talking about human behavior, patient behavior, and we're thinking about the complexities of care. And when we're thinking about like disadvantaged communities, right? Design thinking is very good at dealing with these very wicked problems where there's a lot of facets to it, a lot of different actors. So you see more health insurers really getting very embedded. The best way to control cost is to control health, right? Better health outcomes. Those are fascinating, but design thinking is being used throughout all of healthcare, from the patient to, I mean, most of you know about CMS and putting patients over paperwork, reducing the administrative burden on the actual providers. All of these things are things where design thinking is playing like a massive role in making sure we understand the real problem and not just making kind of big assumptions, that we're working with partners in order to create solutions that work for the business, you know, for the provider, for all kind of interested parties. So in fact, if you go on if you go on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn, there's even groups called Doctors as Designers. And these are doctors who've learned design thinking and are using design thinking in order to improve healthcare in countries all over the world. So I find it fascinating, really.
Okay. And some more questions, Dana. What do you think is the role of data in digital transformation and in design thinking?
So that's interesting, because designers traditionally always think, well, data doesn't really, it doesn't tell you the human side of it. It doesn't give you the complete story. But in fact, that's a very old kind of concept. Data, there's all this talk of data and design. How do you bring these two things together? Because it's the story of two problem solvers, right? As Mark Curtis puts it, trying to solve a problem, but they're starting at opposite ends of the spectrum, where data starts with data and moves to model and used to experience to user. Design starts with the user and goes to the experience, creates models, and then ends up with the data, right? Data really amplifies problem solving, and specifically when you start using data in much more powerful ways, rather than just kind of keeping score, which is a lot of what data is used for. Organizations that really think about how do I develop my digital services in ways that allow me to capture data in time in order to make an in-moment decision that is personalized to a singular person. That's really the promise of individualized healthcare and individualized care plans. They really come on the back of AI and machine learning and grooming your data and thinking about your organization as a data-rich and data-forward organization.
Very interesting, very interesting. I have another question here, Dana. What is one thing leaders can do now to help make sure their digital projects are a success?
I think there's like a lot of things that leaders can do, but one of the very early things is to really start to think about outcomes from users' point of view. So we tend to create KPIs that are very business driven, and of course we need to have those, right? Those guide us greatly, but helping the whole organization spend the time to get out of the office and in front of people. You know, I know a CEO from a health insurance company that I've worked with in the past, and he would be very specific with his people. You can't keep making these decisions just here. You need to get out and you need to go to the EPAS. You need to go to where care is administered, right? And understand, claims, right? And coding from where it kind of originates. I think, Procter & Gamble is known as a company that really saved itself through design thinking. One of the things they started doing is that anyone who really worked in a customer facing role or customer decision-making role would spend some, 10 hours per month intentionally out of the office, intentionally with users in order to understand their context. Allowing people out to spend more time with users and having more discussions about how will this impact users is usually a kind of a good preface to start making better decisions.
Perfect. I think we have time for one last question here, Dana. What are the biggest things that stand in the way of people applying these principles?
I think it's a lot of old way of thinking, right? Where we rush to judgment. We're in a hurry to be action oriented, right? And to rush to an answer, right? We feel that pressure, that not giving just that little bit of time in the beginning to say, you know what? I know we need to build this. I know we think we're pretty clear about what it is, but let's stop and just invest a little bit of time to dig into it and check our assumptions. That desire to rush and to create kind of this deadline, I think it hurts people a lot. The other part is to think that the only valuable data is the data that is empirical, numerical, right? Quotes from people, experiences, standing in a nursing station, sitting down with people who have, are there looking at claims and understanding context. That is data. That's data as well. It's a lot kind of harder to quantify, but it is very valuable when you really need to make that gut level decision on what's kind of the right direction to go in. I think those two things tend to stand in the way a lot. When people get past that and start working differently and using a different approach, this becomes a powerful way to align people to make a better organization. When everyone is talking about outcomes around users and is part of the solution, everyone starts rowing in the right direction.
Perfect, thank you, Dana. And this makes me think of what you always have told us inside here at Wovenworth about making sure we build the right thing and making sure that we know what the success criteria is even before we lay the first line of code, so that then we make sure that we build it right. So again, thank you.
No one wants to work on something that was just requirements. They want to work on something that matters, and this is the way to do it.
Yes, agree, completely agree. Thank you very much, Dana. And thank you everyone for being part of this webinar. Hope you enjoyed it and learned something new. Bye.
Thanks so much.